Good morning, everyone. I'm your host for today morning. My name is Michelle, representing the Design Singapore Council. Thank you for taking time out to join us in this morning's webinar, Design Thinking for Business Transformation in the F&B Space. So today's session is brought to you by Design Singapore Council, the National Agency for Design in Singapore, and the National Design Centre. So this webinar is part of the National Design Centre's program lineup in August with a thematic focus on Singapore, our home. We'll share more again on this month's program lineup at the end of this session. With stiff competition and rising costs for labor as well as rental, F&B business owners need more than just an innovative food concept to survive. In this session, we'll be hearing from the owners of two homegrown F&B companies on how they've used design thinking to help rapidly transform and rethink their business. So for now, just some house rules before we get to start off proper. If you encounter any technical issues, please reach out to our technical team through the Zoom chat function. We'll ask for your patience and understanding should the conditions be less than perfect. During this webinar, your audio will be on a mute mode. However, we welcome questions throughout the session. Please keep your questions coming in through the Zoom Q&A function. When posting a question, please help to identify yourself and indicate if you would like a specific panelist to answer your question. For now, I'd like to introduce our speakers as well as our moderators for this morning. We're very honored to be able to invite Mr. Adrian Debaye, co-founder and managing director of Salad Stop, to speak about the use of experience design in a post-COVID world. Having grown up in the hospitality industry in Asia, Adrian and his father felt a need for healthier food options in Singapore in 2009. So this escalated into a vision of bringing something innovative, fresh and tasty to increasingly discerning and health-conscious people. Today, Salad Stop operates over 50 outlets across Singapore, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Malaysia, Japan, Korea, Indonesia, and Spain. Adrian is also a Cornell University graduate and worked as a consultant in the hospitality industry for many years. He has most recently held the position of Vice President, Development and Acquisitions with Kingdom Hotel Investments, spearheading all investment opportunities for the group in China. So next, we have Mr. Steen Pugor, currently an investor and also the former CEO of Four Fingers, who will be sharing with us about designing a brand experience and how that is so important for businesses. Steen was the CEO of Four Fingers Crispy Chicken between 2013 to 2018. Starting with just one store, he set the business on a path to rapid, sustained, profitable growth. After stepping down from his position, he moved to private equity with a focus on acquisitions in Southeast Asia's F&B sector. So Steen's career has focused on brands, F&B, and franchising. He believes in always putting the customer first and connecting with consumers through brand experiences. He recognizes the need to constantly innovate, disrupt, and challenge the status quo in order to ensure a brand and its business model remains relevant to its customers. Steen also sits on the board of Domino's Pizza in the Philippines, as well as the advisory board of the Institute of Service Excellence. He remains a shareholder at Four Fingers. Last but not least, we have our moderator, Mr. Hong Kai Sing, founder of Studio Dojo, who will be facilitating the panel discussion later in this session. Kai Sing has been in the design field since 2004, focusing on design research and interaction design. He was previously the head of Singapore for Foolproof, a UK-based experience design agency. He's a firm believer in holistic experience design, spanning digital, spatial, product, and service domains. However, he also thinks that delivering great design for a client is only part of the equation. It is also key to help clients bring sustained impact and cultural change in the work they do. And henceforth, after leaving Foolproof, he went on to set up Studio Dojo, where he focuses on training, coaching, and advising individual designers, helping teams and leaders from organizations build internal capabilities for design and creative work. His own goal is to enable these teams to acquire capabilities on their own and sustain the innovation in the process in the long run. All right, so now I'll hand the time over to Adrian to start the session proper. Adrian, please.
Okay, thank you, Michelle and Design Singapore for giving me the opportunity to speak today and just to share some insight, I guess, on what we've gathered over the last few years in terms of design thinking and also, I guess, some of our thoughts moving forward in this post-COVID world. So let me just share my slides with all of you. Okay. All right. So let me start off just giving you a very brief introduction on the company. Some of you might know Salad Stop, but you might have not come across our sister brands. Salad Stop started 11 years ago, and really with the intention at that point to provide a healthier option. So we were really looking to just fulfill a need in the market, which was really lacking any kind of healthy option and any sort of form of a good salad. And after a few years, I think when especially we looked at reimagining our store designs and our menus and just trying to expand sort of beyond the CBD at that point, that evolved into creating a movement built around sort of ecosystems and communities. And I'll explain a little bit more about, the transition we did from, I guess, our first store to, the second version. And now moving forward, really, we have the dream of creating a new generation of transparent, tech-enabled health food brands with the utmost respect for the environment. So in terms of the three brands that form part of the portfolio now, we have Wuxi, which is a sort of a maki roll concept focused very much on kind of a younger audience, and we would sort of consider that lifestyle healthy. Hebo, which we launched in September last year, which is a warm grain bowl concept, and we would consider that as feel-good healthy. And then Salad Stop, assuming a few of you are aware of, that's really functional healthy. We really push the boundaries a little bit more on the nutritional side of things. But all three brands really have an overarching principle of health and really, sort of showcasing that healthy food doesn't need to be boring or tasteless, and every one of the brands really offers a lot of personalization, so you can customize pretty much anything. Salad Stop up to today is in 8 markets with 55 outlets. We opened our first international location in the Philippines 6 years ago and have been sort of growing ever since. So to give you a sense of what the design evolution was like, version 1.0 was really just a homemade, we bought some graphics off the internet and put it together. My father and I had some experience obviously in the hospitality sector, but we were venturing into the fast food space, and we had to do this on a budget. Obviously, we signed 3 locations before opening the first one. So we really felt there was an opportunity and a gap in the market, but we had to keep costs low, and we launched, with our original design in Marina Square in 2009. About 6 years after that, we started working with Ong and Ong on version 2.0. And the big part of that was also just asking ourselves, what we stand for, where do we see ourselves, what resonates with customers. The customers also started asking us a lot more questions about where our food was from, just became a lot more educated about the product we were offering. And that's where we really felt we needed to sort of convey the message of what we believed in and what differentiated us. Along the way, and especially over the last 5 years as we've grown internationally, we had to adapt the concept, not just to the local taste buds, but also adding some design elements which just suited the local market. So in every market, we then worked with local designers to tweak the positioning and the design, but always keeping in mind, what the DNA of the brand was, and making sure that we didn't deviate too much from some of the elements that we originally had developed in version 2.0. The picture on the top right is Salad Stop in Indonesia. We've got 15 outlets there, doing very well, and there we really actually had to position it in a slightly more premium position, and really looking at at creating more of a lifestyle brand rather than Singapore, which is probably a little bit more on the fast food side of things. And in Hong Kong, we opened that about 2.5 years ago. That's actually our own operation, and we have 3 stores there. And we also changed the design quite a bit more from an operational perspective, where we created an online pickup shelf. And the biggest change there was actually creating a customer-facing salad bar, where you would be used to in Singapore. But what we also built was we built a back of the house salad bar. So that back of the house salad bar is really just to handle online orders. And in Hong Kong, we do close to 50% of all of our business online. And 25% of those of all transactions come through our own app. So we really built that with the mindset that we were going to move our business online. Hong Kong, we're very tech savvy, and we needed the capacity to handle that volume, both online and offline. Version 3.0 was just about to begin this year. We had quite a few exciting plans for SaladStop. COVID threw all of that up in the air, but also in many ways cemented the ideas that we had, and also offered a lot more thoughts on what will be important moving forward in terms of design. So I'll go through some of those thoughts, but also to give you a sense of what we have been working on. Just to give you just a little snippet, we also opened Heybo, like I said, in September last year. And this was already a transition of where we would see SaladStop 3.0 move. So, ordering kiosks, we have 4 ordering kiosks, 60% of all transactions happen on the kiosk. We've integrated every point of sales into one common printer. So for the team in the back, actually, they receive the order, no matter if it's come from an online portal through the kiosk or through the POS. They don't really need to think beyond that. They just look at this order slip, they run it through the line. So incredibly efficient. And we really luckily had SaladStop as a base to learn from, and position this with a slightly lower price point, because we actually achieved such amazing efficiencies with our operation there, that we were able to drive down the price and actually appeal to a much wider audience. So in terms of learnings from COVID, obviously 70% of our business is CBD focused, or I guess relying on office clusters. The CBD, even up to now, is very quiet, but we have transformed some of those outlets into cloud kitchens and really focused on delivering our product to people working from home. So that's obviously a trend that we see staying. We don't know up to what point, but we've also seen a lot of people becoming home chefs. Sourdough starters were a big thing, healthier options as well. So we think we're well positioned, but we definitely need to transform our business to make sure that we reach out to customers wherever they are. The emergence of third-party logistics providers. So that was a big thing that we learned through this whole period. We did not need to just rely on the big Deliveroo, Panda, and Grab. Lalamove, Ninja Van became really strong players, and we were sort of forced to work with them and actually do a huge amount of business with them right now through our own SaladStop delivery. I think the economic climate obviously is very challenging right now. So we do see people tightening their belt. So I think we will also need to be very careful on how we continue positioning ourselves over the next few months, and maybe some products that we need to push out a little bit more to maybe not be kind of a premium fast food, but just something that is kind of a really everyday use for everyone. As we are very CBD focused, we also need to look at the real estate optimization over the next few years. If people are going to work from home more often, we will need to move into those neighborhoods, and that really puts into question what happens to a lot of our stores in the CBD. And then the business economics. I think we've for a long time debated and grappled with landlords on the rental structures moving forward. As we move more of our business online, that comes with heavy costs, but also I think the value of a physical space is also put into question. So I think the discussions we have now are definitely a lot more open and a lot more based on reality, because we will just not be able to pay the same amount of rental when 50–60% of our business is online. So I think that is a reality for landlords now, and something where the P&L basically has to start shifting in a more equitable direction. So during COVID, we also tested a lot of things. We had excess capacity. We had closed half of our outlets during the circuit breaker. A lot of our business then shifted to some of the outlets in malls, which we were very fortunate for, and online. So we then just launched a few things, and I'll just mention the ones that didn't work. So you also know that we tried a lot of things. Some did stick, some didn't. The ones that didn't stick were breakfast kits. We thought that to increase our basket size, people would be willing to, kind of prepare a little breakfast the next morning. That didn't work. Bundles, kids meals, for some reason, none of our brands kind of work with bundles. So we still sort of trying to figure that out. And then I think discounts. So this was becoming a very discount heavy market. And we tried a little bit, but we realized that, we did have a very loyal base, and we just had to kind of go after them and try to make sure we were top of mind. The things that did work, and I'll go through some of these initiatives and sort of tie it all together in terms of how this will impact our store designs. But Salad Stop Market, we launched about 4 months ago, in a very beta phase still up to this point, but I think obviously learning a lot of things, and we definitely see quite a bit of traction on a few fronts. One of it is healthy meals done in sort of 10–15 minutes. We provide you basically pastes, pre-cooked items, products that are really easy to combine, and that you might be able to just add on to a few items that you have at home. So we really obviously see people more and more now pressed for time, still based at home, cooking for the family, but still looking for a healthy option. So we have added a lot of content now to the website, and we'll continue to do that. And also starting to work with local influencers and chefs on creating pastes for them, so they don't have the capacity to obviously produce these pastes in bulk and to be ABA certified, etc. So we then leverage off of our central kitchen to produce their recipes for them, and then upsell and cross-sell all the products that we have on the market to hopefully bring you a different experience. So this was a collaboration we did with Paul Foster and his mom, looking at really bringing back a lot of old Peranakan recipes and modernizing them, and also adding obviously a lot of healthy elements like the Impossible Rendang. We are also teaming up with Tinok. Tinok is also a very avid, passionate chef in Singapore, has a lot of different recipes and has always wanted to do this. And so we're teaming up with him on launching 3 new pastes later this year. We also launched something, Salad Stop Connect. So just to give you a sense, we have been investing in our own technology for a very long time, and we built a website, connect.saladstop.com.sg, in about a week, and really off the back of a delivery fleet that we were building during COVID, but also something where we started hearing from a lot of office workers that they didn't have the chance to connect and meet up for lunch anymore. So what we did is we offered them an option to just fill in the email addresses of all of your colleagues. You can check out, each of them receives an individual voucher, and then they use that to check out and have the items delivered to them just before their meeting time or their Zoom call. So a very simple solution for us actually to build. But I think, it really was sort of thinking outside the box and offering something that people were used to when they went to the office, but now sitting at home, they could do this virtually. So you can visit the website and have a look. And then lastly, one of the big fundamental changes in our business is really opening our first cloud kitchen concept. So when we started delivering island-wide in March with Deliveroo, we started seeing all the distribution points and basically where people lived. And we saw that a large concentration of that was around the East Coast. And so when we started digging a little bit further, we started seeing that Domino's, Pizza Hut, and Deliveroo Editions all were located on one street. And we continued researching that, and we really found out that that was the optimum location in terms of delivery radius to capture most of at least our target audience in the East. We knew how much we were delivering to that area already. And just with those deliveries, we could already break even based on the rentals that we were finding in that area. So I think we learned, we optimized, and then when we found this location in Tanjong Katong, we were able to bring together 4 of our brands, and Smoosha is actually a new virtual brand that we launched from the Salad Stop outlets. And we are now able to combine them all in one menu. So for customers, you're actually able to order a maki roll, a grain bowl, a smoothie bowl in one order, and it gets delivered to you island-wide. So this is the location in Katong. So if any of you live in the East, this is a nice, healthy option now. We've been running this for about 2 weeks and seeing some really promising results. We don't have much of a customer-facing storefront, so it's really very focused on just the cloud kitchen. But we were able to reuse some of the old equipment from previous outlets and get this up and running within 2.5 weeks. So this is my last slide, and really, I guess, the most important one for today. What we've learned over the last few months, I think, have definitely reinforced a lot of the design thinking that we've been going through over the last few years. One of the ones, I guess, that we've seen, and especially again very apparent during COVID, is creating unique experiences. So I think, as people are now able to go back to restaurants, I think they definitely look forward to that experience in store, and that is really a challenge for F&B operators to continue elevating that experience. So I think the pressure will be actually even greater for restaurants to deliver on that promise. But at the same time, I think people have learned to cook at home or even set up a nice dinner at home. And I think a few restaurants have done this quite well over the circuit breaker, where they've sent sets and a whole experience to the home. So I think that's really another opportunity for restaurants where, they could be full for dinner, but at the same time, they have a back kitchen delivering beautiful sets like Odette did and a few other restaurants, where you can replicate that restaurant experience at home. I think there will be a lot of opportunities, at least for us, to create new offline and online sales channels. So what I mean by that is, and as you've seen with Salad Stop Market, we really need to be much better at engaging customers within a store and then shifting them online. So to give you an example, if you love our banana cake in the store, you would have a QR code in front of it that you could scan, and that directly launches you into the checkout page for Salad Stop Market. With one click, you've ordered your whole loaf of banana cake for the weekend, delivered that night. So that's really the use of space now, I think, will be very different moving forward. And I think we need to continue optimizing every square foot and really thinking about how we constantly move people online, offline. And I mean, you hear the O2O, strategy from a lot of companies, but I think COVID has really cemented that and made it very real for us. The store layouts are also going to fundamentally change. I think we've continued adapting our store layouts over the years, but moving forward, I think, everyone's online business will grow. I think there's going to be a convergence of your, in-store customers and your delivery riders. Virtual brands, a lot of people have launched from existing kitchens. That means obviously a different back of the house setup as well. Contactless experience, I think that is here to stay as well. And I think the safe distancing measures also have been very interesting to observe. So we operate those 3 outlets in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong actually bounced back very quickly. So we had a very sharp decline in February, but towards the end of March, early April, it actually felt like business as usual. But what we did observe is a lot more people shifting to online pickup. And we are used to crowds and long queues for lunch. What happened was that a lot of people would then stay away from that and move online. So I think, the crowds or just busy spaces, I think some people do get a little bit uncomfortable with that still. And that might actually again cement itself over the next few years if this becomes the new normal and everyone gets used to this new way of life. Unifying the online and physical storefront. So I think the challenge again for a lot of F&B operators will be that even if they enhance the design experience in store, I think the expectations from customer on what you deliver online is now as high as what you deliver as a physical experience. So I think, you know, we've invested a lot in our own technology, and I think the customers' expectations in terms of us being like a Deliveroo or Foodpanda, I think is also increasing. So we know we will never be able to compete with them on that side, but I think there are a few touch points that are critical from an online experience standpoint, and we really need to nail those. Those are really elements that we're very, very focused on now to make sure that we can shift some of the customers over to our side, and that again, if we've got an O2O strategy, that it just feels absolutely seamless. And lastly, obviously COVID will have impacted a lot of restaurants very badly this year. And I think, you know, even if restaurants were able to break even from a EBITDA level, they will have not been able to cover their depreciation. So I think restaurants will definitely be very frugal and stay away from any large CapEx investments. So I think from, you know, a design perspective, again, I think, you know, looking at low cost materials, thinking outside the box on how we can revamp spaces, I think will be critical over the next few years. Because again, I think we're quite far away from really being back to normal. And I think even for us, we had plans to renovate and, you know, to do a whole new design. I think those will be put on hold for now. And I think we're going to be investing more actually on the online experience and trying to just maintain what we have in the stores. So that brings me to the end of my presentations. Obviously, we have some question and answers, so happy to go through those.
Hey, Adrian.
Yes.
Would you like to take one of the questions from one of the
Sure.
A quick one.
Yeah.
We have one question from Pat Chong. Hi, Adrian. You've shared the outcomes of design thinking, but could you share how you went through the DT process, and were there any particular methodology you followed?
So I think when we worked with Ong and Ong 6 years ago, yes, I think there was you know, we really went through interviewing our customers, you know, working with our team. Really, we went through a 3 or 4 month just discovery process. And I think that was fundamental to really laying a base for us moving forward. I think it definitely shifted our mindset, and I think design thinking has just become part of the organization now. I think a big part of it is also, I guess, the culture that we have internally. So we constantly challenge ourselves to think further, and that we have a very young team that is very exposed to, I guess, what is happening also outside of Singapore. So we're very aware of trends. And lastly, I would say we're just always in touch with customers. You know, so from you know, we never reply to a feedback past 24 hours. We are constantly with our eyes and ears open to what our customers are saying. So I think that also keeps us connected, keeps us updated. And I think it really is about sort of creating that culture internally to make sure that we are just constantly innovating.
Thanks, Adrian. I think let's keep the questions coming in. We'll move on to our next speakers. Steen, would you like to take over now?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I hope that everyone can see and hear me. Thank you to Design Singapore for letting me talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is design. As Michelle said in the opening, I ran Four Fingers from 2013 to 2018. I saw the business through a quite big growth phase. But this presentation of what I'm sharing with you today is less about Four Fingers specifically, and more about me trying to share some of the learnings and principles that I have picked up in my year in F&B that I tried to apply to Four Fingers. Four Fingers is a very visible example of that. But I really want to share with you some of the principles and the processes that will underline what you've seen with Four Fingers. So with that, let me share my screen. So I'll talk to you about what I think is a good way of developing a brand experience. And I'll talk about that from the point of view of how I've spent my last 30 years working with big brands and also as an entrepreneur. And those of you who are thinking whether I started working when I was 3 years old, I'm actually not as young as I hopefully look, but I have spent a lot of time, 3 decades, working with some big brands, starting with Disney, working with Disney consumer products, but also being very involved with the theme parks and the movies. Moving on to McDonald's, later on with Burger King. I ran Baskin-Robbins Coffee Bean Tea Leaf in Indonesia. I launched Costa Coffee in Singapore. And at the moment, I just went through the acquisition of Domino's Pizza in the Philippines. Underlying all this is really having the chance to work with some great people. So later in the presentation, I'll share with you some of the people that have inspired me in my thinking and how I've taken their principles and applied it to the design thinking. Now, I mentioned also that I have some experience as an entrepreneur, particularly 2. So starting with Lazy Gourmet, which was a partnership that I formed with Les Amis back in 2007. Some people might ask, why would I move from fast food, Burger King, to Les Amis? And it was a bit of an odd constellation, but actually a very fruitful partnership we had, because there was a lot of osmosis between Les Amis and myself, me thinking in terms of things like unit economics, scalability, Les Amis thinking in terms of quality and experience and so on. So I picked up many things in Les Amis. We developed Lazy Gourmet, which was a brand of frozen packaged gourmet foods, soups, pasta sauces, and stews that people could prepare at home. We launched successfully in a number of supermarkets throughout Singapore, Jason's Marketplace, Fair Price Finest, Meiji, and so on. And the products were selling really, really well. But in the end, we closed it because we had spent a lot of time on what consumers saw. The packaging, the food, the designs, the website, and so on. And we had completely ignored largely the business model and economics behind it. So while consumers really liked our products and bought them often and frequently, we were not making any money because we had set our own standards very, very high. So as we scaled up the business, we did not make any more money. So we decided to close it eventually in 2009, partly because we were ahead of the home delivery wave, which really took off like 5-6 years ago. My second experience as an entrepreneur really was taking over Four Fingers in 2013 when it was just one store. Great brand, great experience, great design, all designed by a Singapore agency called Asylum, which I thought did a terrific job. So my job was not so much to really create the brand, but rather to figure out why it worked so well, both for what consumers saw, but also what you saw as the operator and as the investor. Where Four Fingers are doing very strong sales. Four Fingers has very high what we call space efficiency, very high unit economics, which means that customers are happy and the investors are also happy. And that's the first lesson I really want to share with you, that I find that the creative design process must go hand in hand with financial discipline. It's very important that you all the time apply that filter or checkpoint that says, this is really nice, but can we make money? And is it something that is scalable? So in the case of Lazy Gourmet, not really. In the case of Four Fingers, it worked out very nicely. So this is the first lesson I want you to take as a takeaway. Now, I talk a lot about brands, and most of my career has been spent working with very big consumer brands. And what I find is useful is to distinguish between branding and brand building. These terms are often mixed up. In my view, branding is just really about attaching your name or logo to something, a bottle or packaging or whatever it may be. Whereas brand building is the process of creating, designing, and building specific associations in relation to a product or service. Now, these associations only exist inside consumers. These are not something you can give to them. It's something that's built up over time if you, as a brand operator, are consistent with your brand experience. So then we can ask ourselves, what do we need to build a brand? And my experience from McDonald's was that McDonald's was found to be one of the largest brands in the world. But we realized when I was working there that no one had brand on their name card. No one had the name brand as part of their job function. So we said, how can we become one of the world's largest brands if no one is specifically in charge of brand? And what we realized was that we had basically over decades been maniacally focused with consistency around standards that we had set ourselves. So over time, people came to rely on McDonald's for a very particular experience. So in my mind, everything you need to do to build a brand is to set your own standards and be consistent with these over time, every store, every customer, and your brand and the brand experience will automatically come from that. Now, why are brands then important? Well, customers and consumers like value. They like to get as much as they can for as little as possible. So I find this equation where we say brand experience over price is the value you provide to your customers. So you can say either you cut prices and therefore the value goes up, or you can grow the brand experience and therefore the value would go up. And my talk, of course, is really about the brand experience design that we can hopefully all learn something from. So what we know about brands are that they do take time and they do require resources, people, and money to be built, but they also provide momentum in times of trouble. Whether you have a temporary crisis, it may be food poisoning, or whether you are seeing something like what we're experiencing right now with COVID-19, brands have momentum that carry you through these. So it makes sense for us to invest in building brands. Secondly, brands are a great way to capture and defend sales, market share, and profit, because once you have occupied a space with consumers, once you have taken the time and resources to enter consumers' minds and create these associations, you sit there and other market entrants will have a struggle to come in and compete with you. Perfect example is that Four Fingers success created a lot of market entrants, but most of them failed because they were really much more in the area of executing, providing people with some chicken, rather than creating a brand experience. And then lastly, brands create economic value. And I will show an example of what I mean with that. So let's take a cup of coffee as an example. If you go out and you buy some beans, you need about 10 grams of beans to make a cup of coffee. That is a commodity. If you take ground beans from a pack, then you are using a product. If you go to the kopitiam and you buy a cup of coffee, you're getting a service. And if you go to Starbucks, you are getting a brand experience. Now, the amount of coffee needed for these four examples is the same. But if you look at what happens on how much money people spend, if you buy coffee beans as a commodity, you spend a few cents. You spend a bit more once it becomes a product. When it's a service, kopitiam, $1.50. But if you go to Starbucks, you spend a lot more than that. But the input costs are more or less the same. The cost of the coffee beans is more or less the same in all these examples. But by building a brand experience, Starbucks create immense value around those coffee beans. Now, I will introduce the term customer journey, which to me really is sort of what happens when someone sees your brand for the first time, and when will they eventually, after having tried you, decide whether to come back or not. I used to go to Chicago quite a lot when I worked with McDonald's, and there is a fantastic Nike shop on Michigan Avenue called Nike Town. It's a 3-story building which uses sights and sound, music, technology, all sorts of effects to create a 3-dimensional experience for its customers. Staff in particular are fantastic there. And that store attracts more visitors than all the museums in Chicago combined. So again, talk about the pull you can create with a strong brand experience. I mentioned Disney as a brand that I encountered early on in my career. We always talk about the Disney magic, but what it really boils down to is the fact that Disney intentionally overmanages certain parts of the customer journey that other brands overlooked. Some of you may have visited Disneyland or Disney World. I attended a training session with Disneyland a couple of years ago, and they shared that nothing is left up to circumstance or coincidence when you visit one of their parks. There are about 1,483 unique touch points or magical moments where you interact with the brand, either statically, it might be a sign, or with the staff. And each of these touch points are included in one or more job descriptions in a theme park, of which there, by the way, are 2,000. There are about 2,000 job descriptions. But every one of these has clear KPIs and quality assurance. So really by being very focused on intentionally over-managing these touch points, Disney is creating this magic for the last almost 100 years. So you will see the box at the bottom left. It talks about what are the brand pillars for Disney in this case. It is firstly, safety is critically important. Secondly, that there should be some efficiency. No one likes to sit in a queue for a too long time. Treating customers or visitors with courtesy is important. And lastly, an element of showmanship is important to Disney. So what Disney says is all of our touch points can be split into people, places where they work, and things that they do. So if you start with Disney, you will get a matrix that looks like this, and you will see which of the touch points are you accountable for in the job that you do and where you stand and what you do. And I think this is a brilliant example of how can you take something that is very fussy and boil it down to something that is very easy to manage, easy to communicate, easy to measure. So I'm from Scandinavia, and there is a joint venture between Denmark, Norway, and Sweden to operate an airline called SAS. It was launched in the 50s and sort of never really came out of the oil crisis in the 1970s and was struggling with bankruptcy for many years. At some point, they said, let's try something new. They had a change of executive coming in to run the business, but they never really managed to turn around. So they approached a guy called Jan Carlzon. And please write this down. Jan Carlzon wrote a book about this called Moments of Truth. You must absolutely read it. Jan Carlzon was not an airline executive. He came from a travel agency. And he said, I don't know how to run an airline. And the board said, well, that's why we want you, because you can provide a fresh perspective. So he took the job. And the first thing he did was to round up all the staff from the head office in a big aircraft hangar. He walked up one of these jetways to use in the old days to get on planes. And he said, hi, I'm Jan Carlzon. I'm your new CEO. I don't know anything about running an airline, but I know that you do. So I look forward to hearing from you. So his message was loud and clear. All these changes that can bring about positive impact doesn't always come from top management. It can come from people who are facing customers who are on the floor. Later on, as he said famously, he said that SAS moves about 10 million people a year. They are on average in touch with 5 employees, and every interaction lasts about 15 seconds. So their brand is created 50 million times a year in 15-second brackets. And these moments of truth is when SAS can prove to its customers that SAS is the best alternative. I highly recommend you reading this book. It's not very long, but it provides you with 2 great principles, one of which I'm sharing with you today about how to manage the moments of truth. Now, brand experience and customer journey. Let me introduce you to the concept of brand inertia. Brand inertia is how likely you as a consumer are to repeat a purchase from a brand. So let's imagine now Shake Shack. Shake Shack launched in Singapore quite recently. And each one of you will have heard about Shake Shack for the very first time. And based on that, you will have decided whether you want to try it or whether it's nothing for you. If you say you will give it a chance, you will go through a customer journey that will have a number of touch points. And at the end of the first exposure, you will decide you want to do that again, or you will never come back. When we talk about brand inertia, we're talking about increasing the chance of you saying, I will definitely go back, and avoiding people saying never again. So how does this happen? Well, let's think about this journey as happening at different levels. So think about media as one area where brands can reach consumers. You think about outlets, which is where you build the stores, how they're configured. You think about the kind of products that you're serving in what environment, and you think about the staff. So either we can leave up to chance how all these things happen, or we can take every single point along the red line and say, how do we intentionally create and overmanage this so we maximize the chance of people at the end saying, great, I would do that again. So I've used examples here, media, outlet, product, and staff. But for each of your businesses, you can define what are the different levels that you think are the levers that you have to work with. And each of these will have more granularity. So for instance, outlet can be design, lighting, music, seating, and so on. Product can be, you know, the value you provide, the choice, the variety. Staff can be the interaction, and so on. But what I want to show is that we cannot leave these things up to chance. Because if you do not intentionally and with great deliberation create the customer journey, it'll create itself. And that may not be what you want as the brand owner. Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll try to sort of encapsulate what I've shared with you into some examples from Four Fingers. We started by saying in retail and F&B, what are the tools or the levers we can use to design a unique brand experience for our brand? So that can be things like interior design, where you build the store, the kind of food you serve, how much you charge, how the seating is arranged, and so on. You can see there's a long, long list of things that are not always deliberately and intentionally used by the brand owners. And one of the things I'd like to pause on is on the aspect of technology, because I find technology is usually seen as a way to gain efficiency and save money and so on. And I think that's all good and very well. But I believe technology, much in line with what Adrian showed earlier, is really all about using that to create a unique customer journey. How do you interact with customers? How do you customize your offer to them based on what you know about them? How do you create a seamless customer experience that will, at the end of the day, increase the value for customers? So moving on to Four Fingers. As I mentioned, Four Fingers was started in 2009. It was one store when I came in. It was already very well configured, but the business was kind of held back in its growth through some structural issues in relation to shareholders, funding, and so on. So my job was to say, rather than create the brand, which I can't say that I did, it is to protect and refine all the things that made the brand work so well. So starting with what do we get involved in terms of the causes as a brand? How are consumers exposed to Four Fingers? Some of you may remember the Rio Olympics back in the day when people could still congregate and be together in big spaces. We sent a national rower, Aisha, who had the big dream of going to the Olympics and row for Singapore. She was struggling to get funding from the Sports Council. And in the end, I've known Aisha for many years because I'm also a rower. I said, look, Four Fingers will take care of this for you. So we put her on a stipend that allowed her to train. We supported her journey to Rio. And even though she didn't come back as a winner, she was, in our minds, a winner because she represented Singapore in the Olympics. To me, this is the highest possible honor you can achieve to represent your country in the Olympics. Now, why would that be something for Four Fingers? It was because as a brand and as a business, we also had big dreams and big aspirations. We had determination to really move things and achieve something that was great. So we said, this is a very nice way for us to start. Later on, we said, well, let's get involved with other people that are known in Singapore, but a bit more rebellious because the Four Fingers brand DNA was also about being disruptive and a bit rebellious. So Sam Lowe, also known as Sticker Lady, was famous or infamous a few years ago because she walked around and put stickers on road signs and stop signals in Singapore, and was actually arrested and thrown to jail for vandalism. She didn't stay in jail for long. She came out with a slap on the wrist. But we thought, wow, here is a real rebel. Here's someone who is challenging the establishment, someone who is a small underdog up against the Goliaths. Sam is very involved in social causes, and we say we like that very, very much. So we asked her to decorate some of our stores, again, because as a brand, it's about more than just providing some seating. And she's done some wonderful artwork for us in our stores, and she continues to be very involved in social causes. We like that very much. And then we said, well, since music, as I'll talk about later, is an important part of the Four Fingers brand experience, let's take music outside the store so people will see us outside the stores. And we arranged the first ever open-air concert in Singapore where local bands and local DJs got on stage. We rented Fort Canning and provided a free concert for anyone who wants to come. We couldn't sell Four Fingers food there, and that didn't really matter because we were not doing this for make a profit. We did it because as a brand, it was an amazing and awesome thing to do. There were other vendors there, and parts of their proceeds went to charity. So it was a very, very nice thing that, of course, did cost some money, but it garnered big, big, big media value for us in terms of the exposure that we got. Okay, moving along to store design, which is sort of the very tangible part of the store experience design. If you think about Four Fingers, you probably think about red, white, gray, black, and white with some timber. So this is a unique design language or vocabulary that I said, let's stick to this, because I want all the stores to be recognizable and distinct, but also unique. I don't like uniformity, but what I like is that the stores all look not like twins, but like cousins. So we developed a design language that was quite consistent in the use of colors and textures, red, gray, white, black, but also used timber to kind of soften the overall impact of the stores. And as we built the stores, we made sure that we tried to make them relevant for our customers. So in the bottom left corner, you can see our community wall where everyone can write a greeting or a poem or whatever you'd like to add. On the top right corner, you will see how we painted our logo. I wanted it to look like someone snuck in the middle of the night and painted it with a big brush pretty quickly, because again, as a brand, we were non-conformist. So I'll take you through a few slides that shows you the design of the stores. And here I really want to touch very importantly on space efficiency. So we all know that rent is very expensive in Singapore. So maximizing the area we can use for customers is critically important. If you think about the counter, you see that it's moved all the way up to the lease line. So conventionally, the counter will always sit, 5-10 meters back, people walk up, but all that space is wasted. We move the counter all the way up to the front because it uses space better, and we can serve customers right as they pass us. Secondly, you will see that the seating arrangements inside the stores is quite close, quite communal. So we can pack a lot of seats into a small space, which is good for the number of customers you can have in the store at any given time. Overall, to me, the store should really have no sign of four fingers inside the stores, other than if we consider it to be as an ornament. But you will see that the four icons, the hand, the Korean sign, and the chicken, is something we use as an icon and as an ornament to our store design. Moving inside the store, the tall tables actually were not very often in use because people in Asia like to sit at lower tables. But we used it because it signals something a bit more casual to our customers. We like very much the use of lighting, not as illumination, but as decoration. So customers, when they glance inside the store, can see these guys are open. Right? So for me, lighting is very often underutilized to create ambience, to emphasize colors and textures. The gray cement screen wall you see there was actually inspired by me cycling through a tunnel in Denmark, and I just like this very raw finish of the walls. I like the texture it brings. And you will see the use of timber also is there to really soften the hardness of the white and the gray tiles. Not many signs of four fingers inside the stores, other than these icons, which we consider to be iconic, if I can say that, for our brand. So therefore more decoration than actually advertisement. Now, talking about packaging, which is another lever that we have to build a brand, Four Fingers decided to actually increase the cost of packaging because it allowed us to buy packaging that was more environmentally friendly and more recyclable. In Singapore, we still don't have a lot of recyclability because most of our trash goes into one chute and off to either a landfill or waste incineration. But as a brand, we said we would take a step in the right direction. We would actually have more cost because we believe that is an investment in building the brand perceptions. We'll also see that on the top right, we have our mess tin, which is iconic for Four Fingers, but also very good because it reduces packaging, because all you need is just a simple piece of wax paper. Now, my favorite subject, which is staff and uniforms, and I'll share a little anecdote with you. I joined McDonald's many, many years ago as a marketing manager, and I was told, but first you report to the store, you work there for 2 weeks to understand what's going on. And I was given at that time a hideous uniform that I did not feel well in. I did not like wearing it as I was standing and serving customers there. So I said, if I one day can design uniforms for a brand, I want uniforms that people will want to wear to and from work. And I'm very happy to share that our staff would actually be stopped by customers in public transport and say, oh, you work for Four Fingers, can I take a selfie and so on, because they like the uniforms, they like their brand. But staff is really so much more than just handling transactions, right? I think technology allows you to replace some of these menial tasks of handling transactions and deploy staff to tasks that are much more about interacting with customers, about making sure customers are happy, making sure that customers' expectations are exceeded. And in this journey of designing our brand experience, coming back to that long red line, we worked with an agency called Ideactio, who insisted on talking to my staff about how to create all these brand moments and touch points. And I was actually quite skeptical and said, I don't really think they're used to this kind of discussion, but have a crack at it. And I was very, very pleased to be proven wrong, because the moment that we opened up for our staff to share ideas, this amazing wealthness of we can do this, we can do that, bubbled up. So first of all, I got really good ideas that we can document. But secondly, as we rolled out our brand promise and our brand journey, half the job of communicating it was already done, because the staff recognized their own ideas inside that work. And it's a very important point that I wanted to share. Coming from Jan Carlson talking to the staff in the aircraft hangar, says, I don't know how to run an airline, but I know you do. We said to our staff, you are the ones facing our customers, so please share with us all your great ideas. I would also spend a lot of time dealing with the staff, either in the stores or do town halls, where I think the CEO of a company sets the tone and he leads by example. You need to spend time with your staff to show that you share the same value that you expect them to communicate with your customers. And then the last bit I want to share is that I find too often that music is something where a restaurant just turn on the radio on some cheesy loudspeakers. I find music and acoustics critically important to creating a great brand experience. So we would spend quite a lot of money on the sound systems in our stores, and we had a playlist on Spotify which had music that had been curated to really communicate the brand's energy and its pulse. And we played it in the stores over good speakers and a little bit loud, because we thought it should be a very prominent part of the Four Fingers experience. So I hope I've given you some examples of how we intentionally manage these aspects of the customer journey, and importantly, how we used our staff, who are really our brand ambassadors, to communicate many of these. So in summary, to make every brand experience unique, you first decide what is your brand's DNA. If you haven't done that, you really have no destination for arriving at. You also need to understand not the customer social demographics, but understand your customer psychographics. What mindset are you trying to appeal to? What kind of customer values and principles are you connecting with? Especially in this day and age where consumers are feeling less and less, consumers feeling more and more inclined to find brands that are authentic and real rather than big corporate brands. Understanding what are you trying to connect with at that emotional level is important. And then you go about identifying your brand's touch points at the multiple level. Remember the slide I showed you with the red line and the layers underneath? Think about that and say, what should be the very first time people hear about our brand, and what are all the touch points along the way where we can please them and thrill them and exceed their expectations. Use your staff. You will be surprised how many good ideas are coming up. And then when you have all this, make sure you set standards so you can measure these things. For instance, service time is critically important. We should always achieve a hit rate of 80% of 3 minutes, or whatever may be your KPI. Document these and make sure that you have follow-up on it. Internal marketing is critically important, because without that, your staff might not really be switched on and engaged in what you're trying to achieve. So the internal marketing is very, very important. So the external marketing can really prove the point there. Training and retraining is very important. And lastly, making sure that you follow up, that you measure and you correct along the way. In a nutshell, running an F&B restaurant, in my view, is about doing two things only, but doing them really well. It's about figuring out what is that customer journey, what is one customer experience, and then you document that well and you scale it up hundreds of times per day per restaurant. That's the micro level. At the macro level, it's about figuring out how you configure a store in the best possible location, with the best possible space efficiency, with the best possible design, so that the economic realities behind running your business are also maximized. So it's the micro and the macro coming together that, to me, is what brand design is really all about. And with that, I think I have expended my time, and I thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Dean. I think we'll just quickly take one question from an attendee. So she said, hi, Dean, you have shared about the Disney Magic, which is created by Overmanaging. Do you have any insights on how they structured their Magic team and how large the team is? So we just take this question and then we'll move on to the next segment, but we'll take more questions during the Q&A and panel discussion.
Good. Excellent question. So what Disney does is Disney really focuses on its staff before its customers, and it doesn't worry at all about its shareholders. What the thinking is to say, if our staff is really happy, really proud, and really committed to work with us, then we don't need to worry much about the customers because our staff will do that for us. And if customers are happy and pleased, then our shareholders will be happy because customers will come back more often and spend more money. So Disney puts a lot of emphasis on onboarding people. When you get your official name tag with Disney, that's a big deal for Disney. That is a bit like your birth certificate. You are now part of the team. So I think what we can learn as operators is to say, never underestimate the importance of really making sure that the people who are the frontliners are committed and are on board and understand the mission.
Okay, I hope that answered your question. Thank you, Steen. Okay, we'll now move on to the segment on the schemes for SMEs. Yeah, so hope everyone have enjoyed that very insightful sharing and inspiring share from Steen and as well as Adrian. Both these companies have transformed their businesses using this approach that is actually the design thinking methodology, which I'll explain briefly in a bit. Before I get into that, I'll just like to share a short introduction on the council. So Design Singapore is the national agency for design in Singapore. We champion the classical design disciplines like graphic, architecture, as well as fashion. So we have emerging design disciplines coming off as well, such as experience design and service design. So, and all the other sort of design thinking related methodologies that help to drive innovation for companies. Basically, our ultimate vision is to help Singapore become an innovation-driven economy and a livable city by design by 2025. So just to share with everyone the definition of design thinking. Design thinking is not just about design for visuals or design for a shop front. It's about the balancing act of putting people, business, and technology together, but always starting with what your users find desirable or what they need. So sometimes, I think in the example of Steen's case, right, your users are also your employees, your frontliners, and that's essential. So Steen also talked about, business economics, users' needs, and then supporting that with technology as well as business viability. When you're able to achieve this sweet spot is when innovation can take place and when innovation can happen. So underpinning design thinking is this very fundamental 5-step process, starting with empathizing with your users' needs. So you heard from Salad-Stop as well as from Steen that how they go about gathering feedback and insights is when they talk to their customers or when their customers gives them the feedback. And then you go to the next step to define the problem and scoping it down, followed by an ideation phase where you brainstorm on potential ideas and then rapidly testing it. In other words, to prototype, and then testing those ideas again and again. So this iterative process is what really underpins the design thinking methodology. And in a nutshell, design thinking can be used to help ultimately shape and improve customer experience, as you have heard earlier as well, help to pivot your businesses into adjacent markets, improve and sharpen brand positioning, even helping you to go digital and building building capabilities. Through that process, you get to have a deeper understanding of your users' needs, their behaviors, de-risk the innovation process, and then save costs in the meantime because you rapidly prototype and expedite the whole development process. So you heard from Adrian, I think he managed to launch an entire website within a week because they have prototyping mechanisms in place to be able to launch and de-risk their sort of process and quickly roll things out. So if you are entirely new to this concept, no worries at all. We hope today's session is a primer that will help inspire you to find out more about design thinking. In fact, as the council, we have recently rolled out 2 schemes in collaboration with Enterprise Singapore, ESG for short, for companies who wish to start using design to transform their businesses. Companies can receive up to 80% subsidies. So the first one, it's on the use of user journey mapping for businesses. As the name suggests, this is similar to what Steen mentioned in terms of mapping out touch points when your customer interact with your brand. That's one. Under that first option, right? The first scheme, user journey mapping, there's 3 options. And then we have the second one, which is called frame and scope. If you are inspired by the approach that are shared by these 2 speakers, you'll be definitely wanting to embark on these 2 schemes. So the frame and scope one is a slightly more expanded upon version. I'll explain a bit later. The first one I'd like to talk about is the user journey mapping scheme. This gives the companies, an actual customer journey map as a deliverable. I'll show you how that looks like in a bit. This map allows you to evaluate the entire process of how your users are interacting with your brand, the positive, the negative experience, as well as all the good and bad touch points. So you might be, thinking to yourself, how can my company use this? What problems can I use it for, right? So these are some of the examples of problem statements that we've been helping some other companies with. How might we improve the digital learning experience of a cooking academy, for example? How do we want to improve the whole student registration process? And then is there a way for my business to improve the in-store experience? So we can't name the companies, but these are some of the live problem statements that our panel of consultants are helping the companies on. Okay. Now I'll show you an example of what that user journey mapping looks like. Basically, as you have heard from the earlier speakers, it is sort of like a journey map. And in its most basic form, it compiles a series of user goals and actions into a timeline. This timeline is then fleshed out with users' thoughts and emotions in order to create a narrative around that. And then this narrative is condensed into this visualization, which helps to communicate insights, informing the whole design process. Okay, so I'll show you another more fleshed out version, very relevant to today's discussion on food ordering, right? So this is an example of someone going about to order food. Where the high points, the low points, how she feels stressed by, working a very busy schedule, and then she starts looking for a place to relax during lunchtime. So you get to see where are the places that you can actually impact and start reaching out to your customers. It's a very simple concept, but when you actually flesh it out, the insights are more than what you can expect. So back to the scheme, this is expanding on the 3 options under user journey mapping. There will be 3 different variations that we're offering to companies. In each of these options, you get to work with, you have the choice to work with your preferred design consultants. Basically, 3 options vary in the extent of which you want to go, how deep you want to do go with the project, as well as your budget. In the first option, it is suitable for customer-facing companies who want a quick understanding of their current customer journey. So as you have seen just now, the customer journey map is going to be that deliverable based on one persona. And in option 2, it'll be a slightly more extensive version that will cover up to 3 to 4 personas. So these are suitable for businesses who are trying to reach out to potential new customer segments for your products or services. And in option 3, apart from surveying your external stakeholders, which is your customers, this option also takes you through how how your internal backend operations, as well as your staff actions, affect the external customers. So it's a whole service design blueprint, front end and back end combined. Okay, in the second scheme, which is the design for business frame and scope, this is for companies with a larger appetite. So using a similar but more extensive process, it will help companies identify and prioritize key areas of transformation and then outlining a strategic roadmap as a final deliverable. So far, we have 6 companies who have onboarded this scheme with us, of which 3 of them have already completed the initial phase. Here are some examples of their project objectives. How do you engage millennials and create that new experience beyond selling products? How do you develop an experience strategy to, target the affluent group of customers? And then can we curate an umbrella of brands for turnkey offerings that, offer new O2O, offline to online service and experiences? So these are just some of the problem statements that companies can work on with this scheme. You can immediately see already from, the difference between the type of ask based on these statements from the first one and the second one. So this frame and scope is a deep exploration and understanding of possible new business opportunities on areas of transformation. It's a slightly longer program that will span between 6 to 8 weeks. There are two key phases to keep in mind. The first phase is funded by the council, the Design Council, and the latter by Enterprise Singapore. So by the end of phase 1, you'll be getting that high-level strategy roadmap outlining certain recommendations. And then with that document, the consultants that you choose to work with will help you draft the grant proposal, which you then can use that to get more funding from ESG if your grant proposal is approved. So that's, in a nutshell, that's all the schemes I have to share with you. I know that's a lot to digest, but no worries. If you cannot remember most of the schemes, just know the details of the scheme. Just know that there's essentially two schemes that you can potentially tap on. Just help me indicate your interest at the end of the session for us to fill you in with more details. So this one will just indicate in the survey form that you'll be able to scan later on. So I'd like to pass the time now over to Kai Sing, who will be helping to moderate the panel discussions. Thank you.
Hi, thanks everybody. Thanks Michelle, Adrian, and Steen for sharing. And thanks to all of you. It's really amazing to see, like, in a single morning, we've got more than 100 people here, and there's a mix of people working in the F&B, other organizations, there's also designers amongst us and design firms. So hopefully we'll be able to have a discussion that we can ask questions that are both valuable for these F&B companies as well as the design firms and partners. We'll answer there are some specific questions that we'll answer a little bit later as well, if you have time to gather. And yeah, I just want to appreciate the hearing from Steen and Adrian. There's a lot around the connection between the business strategy and design that you all both have shared. There's this thing around playing with physical and digital and how those two have to interface really well. There's things about brand and co-creation with a big group. And I guess I want to start off with linking it back to Michelle's sharing. And you are now on the other side where you've done a little bit of customer journey mapping, you've done a bit of design thinking processes. How useful do you think would these two schemes be for companies, and what are the positives that you think people can get out of that? Steen, would you like to start us off with that?
Yeah, I think what the starting point for this should be not to do just because there's a grant. I mean, I've seen many companies do programs because there's a grant, right? I think it starts by understanding what are the business opportunities that you are facing as a company and what are the challenges on the way to realizing these opportunities. So I think depending on what the specific need is, I think both grants actually are very relevant. And as I mentioned when we spoke yesterday, I've been in Singapore for more than 20 years. And I think that we as SMEs are exceptionally fortunate in Singapore to have a public sector that is so much in tune with the private sector and provides grants that are there for companies that are willing to take risk. Right? So Four Fingers has done a lot of innovation, and we've seen a lot of generous support from Enterprise Singapore. But the projects would have been done anyway. I think that's my key point, right? You should do these things because you see a business need. And the fact that there is a grant that will fit that is just an upside, but you shouldn't do it just because there's a grant.
Great, thanks, Steve.
Yeah. And I think just to add as well, I think the customer landscape is changing so rapidly right now that even for us, I mean, we do this internally, but we are always working with different partners on mapping this out. We're actually in the midst of doing this to look more specifically at our online customer behavior and what we need to adapt there. So I think it is just an ongoing process. So I think this is a simple way for a lot of companies to just jump on board, understand the design thinking process, and then hopefully that's a mindset they can keep for the longer term. And I think also we talk maybe about a lot of the projects that we've embarked on, and I think with Steen, obviously when you build a brand from scratch like that, there's so many elements to consider, but I don't think it necessarily always needs to cost that much. I think we come across a lot of third-party platforms, different solutions that you can just get off the shelf, that you can just plug into your business, and this is hopefully also what the consultants would help offer, is that you can get up to speed also very quickly. without having to, you know, run a huge budget.
Sure. Thanks, Adrian. Yeah, and on this note around consultants and getting a partner to support, I'm curious for some of the SMEs and businesses that want to go on this journey and it's their first starting point. What would your criteria be for selecting a design partner? So like for Adrian, if you work with Ong and Ong a while back, we've seen with Asylum, IdeaActio, just could you talk us through, you know, what was the thinking process for selecting such a partner that's just right for you?
So I think it's a mix between sort of using standard templates and guiding us through maybe something that is a little bit more cookie cutter, and that obviously I think any company should follow. And then outside of the box thinking. I think, you know, we as a company at least are always at the forefront of looking at what other international markets are doing. And I think based on our own life cycle and what we're going through, I think that also sometimes needs maybe slightly different perspective. And I think that's where, you know, maybe moving forward, working with a big international firm or at least a firm that has been exposed to projects overseas sometimes also brings a fresh perspective. So I think then it depends really on what you need as a company.
I totally agree with Adrian, and I would add to that you know, the design is an iterative process that can take, you know, weeks and even a couple of months. And what I find is very good is if the chemistry with the people you work with at the consultancy is right. So I think spending some time on figuring out, are we on the same wavelength here? Are you going to give me the cookie cutter, or do you really see what I'm trying to see? I think that's very, very important. I was very lucky that we found a very good partner in IdeaActio for Four Fingers. We did go through a number because we want the chemistry to be there. So it can be a very rewarding process, but I think as in all partnerships, it's important that you consider it a little bit, pardon the analogy, but it's a bit like a racehorse with a jockey, right? They have completely different roles, but one is calling the shots, right? And I think you cannot leave leadership up to a consultant. That has to come from the brand owner. And that's why I put in my slide, you have to determine your brand DNA first, or at least do it with the partner that you have. But that is a starting point for working together.
Right, that's really interesting to have this metaphor of the jockey and the racehorse. I'm curious for both of you, what was the most important thing you learned when working with the design partner racehorses? Yeah, that was really useful for you. That was new to you, perhaps, while you're doing your business transformation.
I'll give a quick example. When we work with our partners, their approach was a bit unorthodox, right? They want to work with all the frontliners. And I said, they're not gonna know what you're talking about. They're not used to sitting in a meeting room, right? And I was fortunately proven completely wrong, because once these people were able to articulate their ideas, a lot of things came up, right? So I think in that process, what to me was very sobering is that I had been sort of preaching the approach of Jan Carlson. You know, you have all the ideas, but I probably wasn't really living it, right? But with the help of the consultant, said, okay, so you told us we can do it, so we will do it. And I was proven wrong in terms of what we could and could not see from the start, because it was absolutely fantastic, really, really surprising.
Right. Yeah, so hearing like design is institutionalizing or systematizing the values that Jan Carlson was talking about. Yeah. So Adrian, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think, I mean, for us, the most, I guess, transformational part, or what we see, is just how the team changes. You know, getting them involved in this process every time is such a big part of their own growth, but they bring so many ideas, and that's, you know, the journey that as well is very exciting. And I think, you know, what we've also noticed is that if we've, like Steen said, if we've had some chemistry with that partner, what we end up doing is very often we bring them back in for smaller projects. So, you know, when we redid our logo, Ken had moved on and created Parable, you know, from Ong and Ong. So we continued working with him. Recently, we created a new brand for Indonesia with Ken. Smusha, we did the logo with Ken. So we just know that he gets it. It takes us 5 minutes just to have a conversation on the project, and he can do something in 2 weeks. So I think that's also, you know, for us, how we look at it. It really isn't just a consultant that comes in and gives you a template. It hopefully is a partner in the business in some ways.
Right, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, and I think we've got a couple of questions, and I'll bring one of them in. And the question is about who should champion design thinking. It takes a big mindset change, visionary to initiate and adopt it. And some of the people might be thinking, oh, you know, I might have to redesign a few stores at once. Like, should I go big bang and just turn everything upside down and redesign it? Or should I go small and try something small off to the side maybe? What's your sense in terms of what kind of advice do you think you can give them?
Steve, you want to go first?
Well, I think the benefit we have as SMEs is that we can make decisions pretty quickly, right? In my time with Burger King and McDonald's, are big companies, and decision algorithms are just extremely long. And to me, the benefit we have as SMEs is that we can prototype really, really fast.
Yeah.
As my big hero, Ken Robinson, said, if we're not prepared to come up with something that is wrong and to fail, we will never have something that is original, right? And I think the idea of prototyping, having an iterative process where you launch and tweak, and if you have more outlets, pilot one, use 1 or 2 outlets to pilot things before you go big, because you can measure things right away. So I think let's not begin to think like big companies, because inherently they're very slow to make decisions, right? Let's think of small companies where it's a few key people that, I think the question was who owns the process. It starts with the CEO. Maybe he doesn't do all the work, but he needs to own and champion and be behind the process 100%. Otherwise it'll never fly. And then be prepared to make big decisions, pilot and iterate and reiterate along the way.
And I also
think Adrian nodding.
No,
nodding
I
along.
totally agree. And I think also, you know, if that store gets rebuilt, I think it's not about just addressing the design changes that need to be done now for what you are facing, but really thinking ahead. So for example, for us, it means hopefully moving to a completely cashless solution in the next year. That would be a big step for us, because some customers will not be happy, but we also know that that is the future for us. We know we need to move in that direction. We've tested it with other concepts in other markets. So I think that's also part of the mistakes you'll make. You might not have designed it properly, and customers will be frustrated and, oh, the technology doesn't work and all that. But then it's all about continuously prototyping with what you can. And then at some point, obviously bringing on a consultant that has hopefully that experience at having implemented it elsewhere.
Right. Thanks, Adrian. One question that was specifically addressed to you, but I think I'll love seeing perspectives a bit later on. Adrian, you talked about you know, trying out with discounts, and that didn't work out. And that's interesting because you initially talked about price sensitivity, and then you talked about discounts not working. Yeah, there's some curiosity about why do you think that is? And you also talked about Salad Stop Connect rolling out within a week. From idea to launch is a week. Like, that's like really crazy, really short timeline. Like, how do you manage? What's the typical timeline for your design ideas getting pushed out and getting feedback?
So I think on the discounts, for the last few months, we've really just been targeting our, I guess, existing customer base. So our existing customer base, luckily, is not too price sensitive. And I think when we did do any discount, we would be in a sea of 1-for-1s and 50%. And it is just not something that we believe in as a brand. So we're willing to give a little bit to try to incentivize people. That example I gave was just one of many where we tried to drive more traffic to the stores again, but obviously a lot of people were just ordering online. So I think sometimes it's just the messaging. And again, that is part of just the A/B testing that we do constantly. And actually being able to do more of this online is fascinating. I think we are really a data-driven company. We make a lot of our decisions based on data. And I think that is actually also a very important point. So if we work with a design firm, we throw a lot of data points at them, because that for us is what speaks. The numbers ultimately will tell the truth as well. So I think, you know, we continuously reiterate based on what we see and what traction we get. And I think on Salad Stop Connect, people have all felt it was a great idea, but we've not seen the adoption just yet. So we've seen it. I mean, obviously a few people have tried it, but being able to kind of convince them to then use it is a different story. So now again, we're going to have to crack that. And we built something very quickly. We're iterating. We're getting a few people to test it, giving us their feedback, constantly changing it. The same with the Salad Stop Marketplace. We're learning a lot, finding our niche, and then tweaking things as we go along.
Right. Yeah. Steen, how about you? Like, what's the typical timeline for you? Previously, Four Fingers.
Well, I would just hook on the question of discounting, because discounting to me is essentially a function of having an oversupply and an under-demand. So I think as you manage your business, how many stores you build, how often and how big, it's critically important to make sure that your brand demand is always ahead of your brand supply. Right? If you are less available than people want you, you don't have to discount. Stores will fill up themselves. And what I liked about what was mentioned by Adrian is the benefit of technology, because it can make it easier for customers to go through an order. But it also means that they spend more money, right? I have not spoken to anyone who does e-kiosks and so on that doesn't say average check goes up by 15 to 20%. Just because relying on a staff to trade customers up is a process that may or may not work. But if you're following an algorithm where you show people a nice photo and click here to add and so on, you will see that your sales automatically go up, and you can reallocate those staff from cashiering to other nicer, more value-adding tasks inside the store. Now, specific time, I can't tell you yes or no, but my philosophy as a CEO was always to empower my people, make sure that they knew what we expected, but also that they had the decisions of how to make decisions and so on. I always think it's better to, as they say, act first and defend later. I don't mind people making mistakes if it is in the interest of doing something sooner rather than later, as long as we avoid repeating mistakes, because if we repeat mistakes, they're not mistakes, they're a choice.
Right. And yeah, onto that point, I think Eric Wong was asking a question about the CEO needing to do this and learning from mistakes. And he asked, in an era where people are impatient and maybe do not feel compelled to invest time for this process, how do you convince and convert CEOs towards this process? Yeah.
So I think that there are three kinds of CEOs. Okay, there are the CEOs who make things happen. There are the CEOs who follow things as they happen, and there are CEOs who wonder what happened. Okay, what I mean is that the businesses are always evolving. COVID has accelerated the rate of change immensely. Right? And I believe that if it hadn't been for the JSS being extended to March, we would see a huge amount of consolidation in Singapore and F&B, right? Because it is changing the whole playbook. So I think any CEOs who are wondering whether or not this is the right thing to do should probably think again, because it's something that is absolutely necessary, because the dynamics in Singapore and in industry are changing. And we're fortunate now to have been given a bit of a respite until March next year, where we have the JSS, because it allows us to say, well, let's get this thing going right away while we still have that as a cushion. Don't wait until the JSS falls away. It'll be too late.
Right. Adrian, do you have anything to add to that?
No, totally agree. I think if you don't transform your business now during COVID, and I think, I mean, from a government's perspective, I can see that it's quite clear. It's really looking, we were giving you some sort of time horizon now, and you have the tools, you have the grants available. You have to jump on board, and if you don't, then you might not be around anymore, and that will be a little bit unfortunate for some, but I think it will be the reality. And like Steen said, it's just accelerating the process.
Right. And building on a question that was asked to Steen earlier about Disney's magic team, I'm curious, what is your version of a magic team? Do you all have a version, or is everybody the magic team? What's it like for you, Adrian and Steen?
Yeah, we have a lot of magicians. I think we're family business, which maybe is also a little bit different. So I think, my dad is no longer involved in the day-to-day. We started the company together. But my sister handles a lot of the marketing side and parts of the operation as well. My brother-in-law also, especially on the international side. So I think, you know, we complement each other very well from sort of a senior management level perspective. But we've also had people that have been with us for the longest time. So, you know, 11 years, they've been there for the first outlet opening. We've sent people from here to open our stores in Hong Kong. So I think people are definitely very committed. And I mean, we have a very open culture. So I think everyone, you know, understands they can share ideas, and we bring them into a lot of the different design thinking workshops that we even do. So, and, you know, that can be an auntie who has worked for us as a part-timer in an outlet. You know, when we did our culture code, where we looked at, you know, what do we stand for as a company in terms of our culture. And that, you know, for them is hugely rewarding to be able to be part of that. So we're still very young. I would say we know we're going to be making mistakes over the next few years, but that's what also keeps us very nimble, and we have a lot of talent across. We hire from different industries as well. We very often do not hire from the F&B industry, and that brings a lot of new perspectives.
All right, thanks, Adrian. Yeah, I'm hearing like you're going into data analytics, you know, digital kiosks and things like that, which are not traditional F&B capacities and capabilities, but that seems like the need right now for you.
Yeah.
How about you, Steen? What's your magic team like?
Well, if I can just add, I think what Adrian said is spot on, but maybe a different way of saying it is to treat your staff as if they're volunteers, right? As if they're not getting paid to come to work. So their pay is job satisfaction, how well they're treated, how much they're allowed to grow in their jobs. I always tried, I can't claim I always succeeded, but I always said I would treat my staff as if they are coming to work without getting paid, and all I could give them is a great place to work where they can grow, they can thrive in accordance with their ambitions. And then you will see things begin to fly. If people enjoy coming to work, everything will begin to grow.
Got it. So we've got a couple of other questions that love to get answered before we close it off. One of it is, who should champion design thinking? Obviously the CEO, but are there other key people you think within a business that needs to champion that to shift?
I'll give a very quick reply because I touched on it a bit earlier, but I think it needs to be championed by the CEO, but I think it's often because it's consumer facing, makes sense to have it led by marketing. As I say, brand is too important to be left to the marketing people, but they are good to be the people who are moving things forward. They are good to be the owners of that project. So that would be my sort of 2 cents worth.
Yeah, I agree. And I think also the obviously the people on the ground, they're the ones that are dealing with the issues that customers face, the different points of friction. I think we still find that constantly. Just to give you a very small example, over the last few years, we have 3 delivery companies, we have Oddle, we have so many different third-party providers that you receive your orders from. That has created absolute havoc in operations in Singapore. You can imagine when you have something like 10 tablets behind you with a customer coming in, sorry, excuse me, I've got 10 orders. It's, that's a design thinking process that we never thought of 5 years ago. But we've had to adapt, the team has to adapt, and they have their frustrations, customers their frustrations. How do you re-engineer that and improve that experience, sometimes with existing equipment and layouts that you have where you can't change that, or it's not economically efficient to change that. So that's just one small example on where the team on the ground, you need to always obviously keep a very close ear for them.
Okay, thanks. And I think we don't have much time left, so I'll end with this one question, which is, what are the experiences of having design thinking in non-profit or non-business sectors, like social service organizations? What do you think is the biggest difference when compared to the profit and the business sector? Curious for your perspective.
I'll have a crack at it first, because the one thing that I would compare is the public sector in Singapore compared to other countries I've lived in. Right? It is second to none. It is fantastic. The ease of doing business in Singapore, or the ease of interacting with the government authorities as an individual, is second to none. So I have been impressed with how well thought through the public sector is in Singapore with regard to how much emphasis it places on serving customers well. It doesn't matter where I call, LTA, any whatever, there's always someone picking up the phone who's well-spoken, well-educated, who can give me an answer right away. If not, they will definitely call back. So I think it's something that Singapore has very deliberately and intentionally cultivated, that the public sector is there to serve the public. And I think it's a fantastic example of how well it can be done versus, I won't name any other countries, but I've worked in 50 countries around the world where I haven't seen this level of commitment to customer satisfaction, or whatever we call it, since we are actually not customers, but we are businesses or citizens.
How about you, Adrian? What's your thinking around non-profit versus businesses?
So I think, I mean, even for, I think it is about still being top of mind and standing out. So I think that, the brand and building that is still fundamental. I mean, even if you're non-for-profit and your motives are different, I think there's still fundamentally a lot of parts of a user journey that we need to look at. I think we luckily have a lot of customers that are very passionate about the brand. We do a lot with sustainability, but that's also because we do it well. Like we actually provide an experience or the communication channels to do that effectively.
Great. Thanks, Adrian. Dean, really enjoyed talking to you.
Can I give just one last closing thought? Sure. Okay, so give me 60 seconds, okay? Because this is a powerful example. I used to travel to Bangkok every first Tuesday of the month to visit McDonald's there. I would normally be on the same flight, Singapore Airlines, coming in, landing around 10:30 in the evening. I would go to the Hyatt and I'd be there for 2 days. So my 30th trip, as usual, the concierge is in the airport to greet me. As I come out of immigration, he guides me down to the limousine. In the limousine, they say, Mr. Kun Pugat, have my newspaper, the cold water, and so on. But here's what happens. Imagine now that this car is pulling out. It's evening in Bangkok. They know that I like to read what was called the New York Times International Herald Tribune. Right? It's sitting there. And I pull it out, but it's dark. The driver checks the mirror, sees I have the newspaper, turns on the light for me to read. Okay, I was just about to ask him. I read the newspaper, and he must have been trained to listen for the folding sound, because as I fold the newspaper, he checks the mirror, turns off the light. So the next day I had a chance to talk to the hotel manager and said, look, what happened here? I mean, my newspaper, I like the cold water and so on, but here's this amazing guy just turns on and off the light. He said, well, the customer journey, which starts in the airport. We went through every single touch point and we said, where can we exceed our guests' expectations? And the reason I share this is because I find it immensely powerful, but also for free. Here we were training attitude, sense of hospitality, rather than, well, just give them the newspaper, right? So these things don't need to cost a lot of money. And while customers like you to go the extra mile, sometimes going an inch is enough, because it's the attitude that really counts. So that would be my closing statement. For people sort of to hopefully take away some good examples of how little these things can cost.
That's a lovely example, Steve, and it's really the beauty is really in the details, and really making each moment of truth count. Right? Adrian, is there a closing thought you want to leave to the audience?
I just think, I mean, this COVID, I think is obviously thrown so many things up in the air, but I think for all of us, it is also about just taking a moment, stepping back and just looking at the process that we're all undertaking and the transformation. And I mean, it is so rapid. I mean, even for us, the slides I shared, I mean, that almost seems like old news from what we're working on right now. But it's fascinating to see that, if you put your mind to it and you have a team that is thinking, on the same wavelength, you can achieve so much. I mean, we really just have, 7 or 8 people in the corporate office, and we get to accomplish so many things. And I think that kind of mindset of always testing and communicating with your customers and just being open-minded just brings you a very long way. So I'm actually very excited about, what this company will look like next year. and what we can also bring to other markets, because I think that, you know, we're all going through the same thing. We have operations abroad that we worry about, but we also see great transformation.
Great, thanks, Adrian. Yeah, I think this thing about iteration and seeing, learning from you about looking really into the details of each touch point and really being proactive to respond to the situation rather than just waiting for COVID to happen. I think those are really good lessons to learn. So I hope everybody enjoyed this session. Yeah, and now I'll pass it on to Michelle. Back to you.
Thanks, Kai-Seng. Can everyone see the screen? Yeah, we hope everyone has enjoyed today's webinar. We'd like to thank all the speakers who joined us this morning, as well as the moderator, Kai-Seng. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Adrian, and as well as Steen, and for everyone to join us today. Should you wish to revisit today's discussion and the content of today's session, the recording of the session will be made available and shared to you via email. Also, we'd love to know what you think of the webinar. At the end of this session, you'll be redirected to a link. So you can click on that link and then help us fill up a short survey. So in the survey, you can also help to indicate which schemes you'll be interested to find out more about. We'd love to share more with your company and how you can get started on all these design thinking journeys. If you wish to find out more about programs that the National Design Center has lined up for the month of August and September, you can scan the QR code on the right side. And finally, I would like to thank the speakers again for collaborating with us to make today's webinar session possible. It's been a pleasure hosting this webinar. With this, we want to wish everyone well and stay safe and have a very pleasant day ahead. Thank you.